Good morning, everybody.
Morning. Morning.
This is an amazing group. Look at all of you. This is fantastic. Just get chills about this whole group you have grown and the community you're building. I just want to say that I met Margie last year. She came, I think we met at the library.
Yes, when you had your book launch.
Margie came to my book launch at the Cameron Park Library, and after the event, she did a beeline for me, introduced herself, and started telling me all about the Gold Country writers. And she's like a flyer, magician. She brought out all kinds of flyers and events, and you guys already know this, Margie is out there promoting you guys. I get emails, she's always keeping me up to date with what's going on. So it's so exciting to see you all together and meet you. So I met Sherry. Sherry comes to the Cameron Park Library Writers Workshop. I co-facilitate that workshop with Laura Gallart, who is the, Laura presented to you as well. She is the El Dorado County Poet Laureate Emeritus. And she loved I don't know what you guys did, but she just was glowing after this event here. And then I don't know if Brenda Sue is here. I know Brenda Sue. Not today. Brenda Sue comes to the Cameron Park Library Workshop as well. So I know a few of you. You're all very welcome if you're ever in Cameron Park. It's the, second Tuesday and third Thursday.
First Tuesday.
Oh, sorry, first. See, Margie even knows my events better than I do. First Tuesday and third Thursday of every month. This month we've had to meet at a brewery because the library is under renovation. But anyway, we'll be resuming back to the library, and you're always very welcome. And the workshop functions a lot like the workshop that Margie describes you have here. You bring in your piece up to 6 pages, double spaced for the prose writers, or you could bring in a poem, memoir, essay, anything. Some people bring in their proposal pitch for a book that they're trying to sell. So and you get immediate feedback. We won't have read the piece, and so you get immediate feedback about the critique. Anyway, it's a fun group, and we've really built this kind of core group. We've all become friends. So it's kind of like what you've built here. It's amazing to see. I'm new to the area. I'm born and raised in the Bay Area, and during the pandemic, I was living right on Lake Merritt in Oakland, very, very busy area. And I called my sister, my older sister who lives in the Promontory in El Dorado Hills near Folsom Lake. And I said, hey, can I come up there because there's just a lot more space and less people, and this pandemic thing's pretty scary. I ended up staying the whole year up here in 2020. I think I went back to Oakland once to get stuff and get clothes and came back. And during that year, I started thinking, I really like it up here. And I started going through some sort of real estate sites because it was completely impossible to buy anything in the Bay Area. And I started going through real estate sites, and I came across this little tiny condo in Cameron Park. I had no idea where Cameron Park was, never heard of it, had no idea where it was. And I called the realtor, and I toured the space, and I put it in offer. There was no competition. I way lowballed under the price, and I got it. And I'm like, what? So it just was this fluke thing. And I went back home and packed up, and all my friends in Oakland, because I'm very active in the San Francisco and Oakland writing community, everyone was like, where? Where are you going? And I was like, oh God, I don't know what I'm getting into, but something's telling me to go to the mountains. and I don't have any friends, I don't know anybody. And then slowly, I was like, oh, wait a minute, let me get in with the writers. Because the minute you get in with the writers in any community, your whole life transforms, and that's what happened. I met Laura Gillard, and she introduced me to the poets and the writers and all the artists. So I have this huge network, and then Margie came up to me at my reading, and now I know you guys. So it's just, it was 2020 when I moved, and so now that I look back, it's, I was scared I wasn't going to meet writers and artists. There's so many out here. Actually, I thought I was going to go to Sacramento a lot. I thought, okay, I'll meet the writers and artists in Sacramento, and I'll go down every weekend. It's not far. I don't go there at all. I don't need to. Everyone's up here. So anyway, I'm just so impressed and blown away and so happy to meet everyone. I just wanted to give a quick shout out. My boyfriend Tony Robles is in town. He's born and raised in San Francisco. Tony is born and raised in San Francisco, and a few months before we started dating, actually when we started dating, he let me know he was well underway with plans to relocate to North Carolina, where some of his family is. His mom is there. He wanted to leave San Francisco for good. He's been wanting to for a long time. And we were like, okay, well, let's just date for a couple of months and then off you go and we can be friends. We're part of the same writing community, the Filipino writing community. And so that was 5 years ago. So, my God, long distance is hard, but he's doing his thing out there, I'm doing my thing out here, and, we're figuring it out. But he happened to be visiting during this, so it was kind of perfect to introduce you guys to him. So Tony Robles is a poet from the Bay Area, currently living in Western North Carolina. He's the author of 3 collections of poetry, the latest being Thrift Store Metamorphosis. He's a graduate from Vermont College of Fine Arts and is currently on vacation in the Bay Area. He sent me a very, very short bio.
The abridged version.
Abridged version. He sent me the humble version. Tony was shortlisted in 2017 for Poet Laureate of San Francisco. In 2020, he was named as Carl Sandburg resident. He's been nominated for several push carts. He's received several grants from the San Francisco Arts Council, from Hendersonville Arts Council. So anyway, that's not what he sent me here, but he's an amazing poet and writer. And we both graduated from Vermont College of Fine Arts. He most recently, and me in 2009.
Very nice.
So anyway, so you're getting a twofer today. Oh, okay. All right, let me start it. Okay. So when Margie asked me to come speak to you guys, I knew I wanted to talk about autofiction because I love autofiction. I write autofiction, and several of my stories in my story collection, Wildflowers, are autofiction. But autofiction gets a bad rap, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So when I sent her my description for this event, I did not use the word autofiction. I used the title, Drawing from Your Life to Write Fiction. But we're really here to talk about autofiction. So, what is autofiction? I know you guys are all prolific and established writers here. You might already be writing autofiction, but I'll just go through it in case there are people who are not familiar. So autofiction is fiction based heavily on your real life, right? So you're drawing from your personal experiences, personal events, and using those stories to create a fictional piece of art, basically. In autofiction, you can modify significant details and characters. You can add characters that weren't at that event or involved during that time period. You can add things that didn't happen. Because all of the things that you're doing in autofiction is in service of getting to the truth of the story. So whatever you need to get to your truth, the reason you're writing this piece, you can take elements of fiction and use them in order to get there and forward your story, propel your story forward. You can invent subplots. You can imagine scenarios, right, in search of the truth. You're basically blurring the lines between fiction and your imagination. And autofiction tends to emphasize the author's emotional experience, subjective experience. So it does become very personal. There are stories in Wildflowers that are autofiction, and the character, the protagonist, when they're going into their interior thoughts and feelings, they're very much mine. That I'm imbuing that protagonist with my thoughts, my emotions, my feelings. So that kind of also makes it autofiction. Okay, and next slide.
Can I ask you a question?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay, why do they call it autofiction?
Oh, sorry, autobiographical fiction.
Oh.
Sorry, autobiographical.
Yeah, I have a question on your PowerPoint presentation. Are you willing to send us the overheads?
Of course.
Because I'm trying to write this down and
Oh yeah. No, I can send it on to Margie. Yeah.
Okay, I
no
appreciate that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
definitely.
So it's autobiography?
It's autobiographical fiction.
Biographical.
Yeah.
Makes
Sorry.
more sense that way.
Yeah. I should have said that first. Okay, why did I not say autofiction? Because it gets a bad rap. There are people, it's kind of, there's two camps. There are people who are like, that's not real fiction if you're drawing from your life. There's a critic, Marie-Josie Roy, who in the Paris Review wrote that it's a bad genre. It has disreputable connotations from the low genres of fantasy, science fiction, detective novels. It's tacky, it's trashy. Right?
You say she has a bias?
Right? And then you've got someone like author Adele Anesi, who's like, it's transformative, right? To take your life and discover your stories through fiction. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but it's kind of like, I'm so tired of people saying, get an MFA or don't get an MFA. There's like this like black and white. Same with autofiction. It's like, it's not a good genre or it's the best genre ever, mixing fiction and imagination. So obviously I believe it's amazing and powerful. So anyway, but I didn't want to put it out there as something that doesn't have some controversy around it. So anyway, and I will say that there are a lot of books out there and authors out there who are writing autofiction, but they present it as fiction, like I present it as fiction, and you can tell, and I'll tell you how you can tell. And I know this, you've seen this a million times. My dear friend Toni Morosevich, who I met doing an event for Lit Quake last year, she was a professor of creative writing at San Francisco State. She came from a Croatian-American fishing family. She grew up in the Pacific Northwest. She now lives with her wife in Pacifica. Guess what? When you pick up her book, Spell Heaven, it's about a Croatian-American woman who grew up in a fishing family in the Pacific Northwest and is now living with her wife in a coastal town. So, writers are doing it. We are drawing from our lives, even if we're not outright saying it. So you probably have come across that, and I can name all kinds of examples, but it's something that we're doing, even if we're not calling it autofiction. Okay. Is autofiction the same as memoir?
I was just gonna ask you that.
Yeah. Is autofiction the same as memoir? So, I'm working on a memoir right now. I know there are memoirists in this room. So, memoir is from memory, right? Memory is subjective. How I remember something is not going to be how, let's say if I'm writing a family memoir, it's not going to be how my siblings remember it, right? So my memory is what I'm interrogating in the memoir and interpreting and examining, right? These are real life events, but they're real life events based on my memory of them, which is subjective. I'm not going to make up things. I'm not, for example, you know, everyone knows, what's his name, James Frey, A Million Little Pieces, that memoir decades ago. It turned out he wasn't in jail for as long as he said, right? He made up things, and he got called out on it. It wasn't a true memoir, because in memoir you don't make up things that didn't happen. In autofiction, you can. You can take a real life event that happened to you, and you can make modifications. You can embellish. It's fiction. You can invent scenes, right? All in the service of getting to the truth of the piece, which we're all doing, whether we write poetry, short stories, essays, memoir, we're all in search of the truth. So if you need to add a scene, you need to add a character, you need conflict where there was none, all those tools are available to you in autofiction. And I'll give an example. In my story, Wildflowers, it's set in San Jose. It's an immigrant family. It's from the point of view of a young, I think she's in 6th grade. Anyway, Filipino American in a violent household. Her father is physically and verbally abusive. And you know, there's all the cultural stuff. There's the racism and immigration and the financial insecurity. And it just like the house is a boiling pot. And he blows up often, takes it out on the girl. That's similar to how I grew up. I fictionalized the story though. In the story, without giving too much away, there are events. There's an encounter she has with a classmate, and it's kind of a coming of age, kind of sexual exploration scene. That didn't happen. There's also a scene where somebody calls the cops after one of the father's violent outbreaks, and a cop comes into the house. That never happened, right? I took a real life story, and the emotional truth for me in that story is kind of the vulnerability of that character in trying to navigate this difficult household. And I added all these things that weren't there because I needed them to get to, again, the truth of the story. I have 3 siblings. In the story, she's alone. And I did that on purpose, because if I had siblings in this, if the protagonist had siblings in the story, she would have people to commiserate with. I'm like, no, she's gonna be on her own, dealing with this alone. So they're conscious choices. So I can say Wildflowers is based on real life, but most of that did not happen in the way that it happened. But it gets to the emotional truth as I experienced it as a child.
How do you know when you're going to end it then? Because you're creating 2 things. So how do you know what your focus is in your conclusion?
Yeah, I mean, that is a question of the century.
Well, I'm glad I asked it.
Ending is one of the hardest. That's like a whole nother speaker
Well,
series.
I mean, but when you write truth, you
Yeah.
have an ending.
Yeah.
But if you're mixing the 2,
Yeah.
which one do you
Yeah.
choose, and
Yeah.
how do you
Yeah.
get there?
Yeah, I mean, that's all in the revision process, right? Revise, revise, workshop, workshop, revise, get help, ask people, is this working? You know, as a writer, am I satisfied? Is this story getting where I wanted it to go?
Right.
You know what I mean? The ending is the hardest part.
Yeah, it seems to me, you talk a lot about the service of the truth. And so once you've reached that point where you feel like you've served your truth,
Yeah.
isn't that reflected in the ending?
Usually, in my book, the endings are very open. I don't wrap any of the 9 stories up in a nice
Okay.
bow.
All right.
They're very open.
Interesting.
Because in my mind, the characters are continuing on beyond the book, and I hope they're going to move toward healing and transformation, whether or not it happens in the story and on the page. And that's something that as a reader, we can experience, right? The reader hopefully can experience that character moving on. So, does that answer your question? Okay. Okay, so fiction, autofiction is not memoir. I love them both. I love them both, but they're not the same. Okay. Why write autofiction? It's exciting. Oh my God. Okay, think about it. When you're out with friends or you're with colleagues or you're just, you're out socializing and you're telling a story about yourself, that something happened to you, it's exciting, right? It's like, oh my God, let me tell you about that time I blah, blah, blah. It's your life, right? It's like we all have lived many lives, interesting lives. We all have had heartbreak. We've had joy. We've had loss. We've had trauma. We've had, we're all in it together. Nobody is escaping any of these joys or challenges of life. We are all experiencing it at different times, right? I could be having a downtime, you could be having the time of your life, but life is cyclical. We're going up and down and up and down. We all have stories, There's no one on this earth who doesn't have a story. And so, why not draw from that, right? It's exciting. It's exciting to tell our story. And you get to explore and interrogate these pivotal life experiences, right? Because a lot of life is just day to day. But there are things that have happened that have changed our lives, that have changed the trajectory of our lives. It could be the birth of a child. It could be getting married. It could be a loss. It could be a new job. It could be moving to another country or state. There are things that happen that change the course of our lives. And those events are prime for writers, fiction writers, poets, memoirists, right? To take a look at those pivotal moments. I keep coming back to pursuing this truth, right? Also, what's fun is it creates tension for the reader, okay? So Claire Keegan is one of my favorite authors ever. And this book called Walk the Blue Fields, I have carried it around like a Bible, and I've read it, 3 or 4 times. I'm gonna read it again. She's actually like the foremost contemporary fiction writer in Ireland right now. And the first story in this book is called The Long and Painful Death. So Claire is a writer, right? And from Ireland. The protagonist in The Long and Painful Death is a writer, female writer in Ireland, going to a writing residence on Achill Island, up in the northwest of Ireland. I don't know Claire. I never met her. We've communicated, but I don't know her. We're not friends. I don't know her life. But obviously I know she's a writer. And when I read this story, I'm like, ooh, this story's about a writer going to a retreat and, meets this kind of creepy guy. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, what part of it's real? What part of it, did this happen to her? I don't know, but there's tension in that. There's tension in like, is this based on her life? Part of it or not? So that's another thing about autofiction. You just don't always know what's real, what's not. Anyway, it's exhilarating to write autofiction, I believe. So that's why to write it, because your life is interesting. Oh, who writes autofiction? So many people write autofiction. I listed a very brief list here, but if you are interested in autofiction, you can literally Google autofiction authors, and the list is endless. There are so many books that are sort of considered autofiction. Annie Ernaux is she wasn't a famous French writer. She was actually a very obscure French writer for many decades. I've been reading her for 20 years, and most people had never heard of her. And then she won the Nobel Prize a couple of years ago, and now she's the big deal, right? And she is most definitely an autofiction writer. In fact, some of her books, not this one, but some of her books, actually, it says in the jacket, fiction/memoir. Like no one knew how to categorize it, so they had to put the slash there. So Annie Ernaux, this is Simple Passion. I think it might be her first book. It's definitely like her most popular book, and where people kind of start when they begin their journey with Annie Ernaux, and where I would suggest you start if you wanted to read her. But I just want to read you the beginning of Simple Passion. So Simple Passion is all about an affair she's having with a married man. This summer, for the first time, I watched an X-rated film on Canal Plus. My television set doesn't have a decoder. The images on the screen were blurred, the words replaced by strange sound effects, hissing and babbling, a different sort of language, soft and continuous. One could make out the figure of a woman in a corset and stockings, and a man. The story was incomprehensible. It was impossible to predict any of their actions or movement. So that's how she opens it up to prepare you for this really intense affair. But what I love about Annie Ernaux is she's not just writing about the affair. She's writing later and throughout the book, she's writing about the affair. And this book becomes a book about language and the inability for language to capture emotion and experience, right? Because we're all trying to capture this truth, but we actually can never get there, right? We can never actually words are not able to transport us there, but we can get as close as possible. And that's what we're all trying to do. And she talks about that in the book. Like, she's trying to use words to get as close as possible to what it was like to have an affair with this married man, knowing she actually can't use words to fully get there. So this is a fascinating book. She's an amazing writer. And I'm not going to read from this, but Rachel Cusk is known for autofiction. Outline is a trilogy. If you're going to read Rachel Cusk, I would start with Outline first. But this is about a single woman, newly divorced, and her meanderings and travel throughout Greece, the conversations she strikes up with a man on the plane. The book is almost about nothing. She did this on purpose. There's no real plot. There's not a lot. There's a lot of rambling, but it is autofiction in the sense that like the protagonist, she was a divorced woman who traveled to Greece. So Anyway, again, I don't know Rachel Cusk. I don't know what part is true, what part isn't, and that's the fascination of autofiction. But so we got Annie Ernaux. Ocean Vuong is a Vietnamese American writer. On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous is about his mother. Rachel, I mentioned, a lot of you know Nausgaard. He's considered autofiction. Sheila Heti, who is a writer in San Francisco, writes about motherhood. And then I already talked about Toni Mirosevic, my friend, who is the Croatian-American writer. So whether these authors or these books are positioned as autofiction or not, you can kind of tell. You know, if you read the synopsis of the book and you read the biography of the writer, you're like, okay, the protagonist is most likely a stand-in for the author, right? You know, for those people who say autofiction is not a real genre and is not legit, I mean, that list, these people are, you know, they're amazing writers who have gotten a lot of recognition. Okay, any questions? Yes.
Hello,
Hi.
my name's Laura. This is the first I've ever heard of autofiction, but it's fascinating because I realize that's what I'm writing.
Yeah, and you didn't know what it was called. Right? You didn't know what it was called.
So who does the identity on the piece that says it's autofiction? Is that the responsibility of the author, or is it then the responsibility of whoever is the publisher?
Yeah, that's a good question. Autofiction is, so first of all, the important distinctive is it's always positioned as fiction, right? So it is sold as fiction, it is talked about as fiction.
So it's titled fiction.
It's fiction, right? Autofiction is something either the author chooses to say, hey, I'm writing autofiction. I say that. Not all of the stories are autofiction in my book, but some of them are. And I say it openly. Some of them are autofiction. Other writers don't label it. It's the readers and the critics who say that's autofiction, right? So I don't know whose responsibility it is. You know, some authors just don't want to talk about that, don't want to admit it or talk about it, or talk about being an autofiction writer. But, you know, it's clearly based on their life. Yeah.
It's nice lady here. You had a question?
Oh, yeah.
I had a statement, and I'm hoping I can say this correctly. First of all, when you said autofiction, I knew instantly what you were talking about. And what this really reminds me of is going to a museum and looking at a Picasso. Because Picasso paints inside out, and the real details are hidden, and you're looking at the emotions, the feelings, the fear, the terror. And by doing that, and at first it's frightening, and then you start to feel the real reality that doesn't show if he had painted the painting the other way around.
Right.
And that's what I feel when I see that.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And I also think when you said people were criticizing it, you know, armchair critics are a dime a dozen.
Totally.
And I just love them. And I say, thank you so much, because their stupidity makes the reality of all the other good things so much clearer.
Right, exactly. And, you know, it's not like autofiction writers are writing exactly how something happened, blow by blow. We are honing it. We are adding things. We're adding dialogue that wasn't there, scenes that weren't there, people that weren't there. It's writing. It's imagination. It's fiction. You know, we're using the same tools that a fiction writer. So to say it's not legitimate. It's like, you know, what wouldn't be legitimate is to just write it out exactly how it happened and say it's fiction, you know? It's like, no, we're manipulating it as writers, right? So yeah, great point.
Hi, Beverly.
Hi.
So I have never seen auto fiction as a genre when I was in the process of publishing my book.
Yeah.
You know, on Amazon or anywhere else.
Yeah.
So would you write a book like that and then publish it under the genre of fiction?
Yeah.
And do you foresee auto fiction as a possible genre showing up for publishing in the near future?
I think more and more people are doing it, but the publishing industry is all about sales. The biggest buyers are women, middle-aged women, and middle-aged women love fiction. We love novels, mostly. The novel above anything sells more, right? Then you get into memoir and short stories. And so the publishing industry is going to, you know, label it as fiction. I don't think you'll really ever see a book labeled as autofiction.
But it could become a subgenre.
Yeah.
You know how they've got the
You're right,
subgenres?
it is, right. It is, it is. I just don't know that you're gonna see it labeled,
Yeah.
right? You almost have to pick it up and say, aha, there's the author's bio and there's a synopsis of the book.
Yeah.
And put two and two together, right?
I once heard a speaker who was presenting on memoir, and a question came up, how much of this is actually true? And he said, all of that which isn't.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. That is great. Yeah.
A question and then a comment. So to go back to your first example, this is for you personally. You know, you have a young girl in a family situation that you know about, and you can write what you know from that. So personally for you, when you have that situation, are you a pantser or a plotter?
Am I a what?
A pantser or a plotter?
What's the first word?
Oh, pantser, you're just right by the seat of your pants, you don't have
Oh,
anything in mind,
pantser.
you let it go? Or do
Oh.
you plot things out, here's my situation, and now I'm
Okay.
gonna take it here, and I'm gonna take it
On
there?
both. On both. So in the early drafts, just write it. Because sometimes the story you think you're writing might not be the story
That's right.
that your subconscious is writing, right? So just create the messiest, raw
Just get it
draft,
down.
get it out, just get it out, and then, you know, walk away. Go live your life, put it away, go do what you do, come back to it. What do I have here? What's going on here? What is really happening here? Okay, I'm a writer, how do I start shaping this, right? How do I, what scenes do I need? What dialogue do I need? How am I going to create tension between these characters? What's the situation, right? So it's both, It's like that first draft. I mean, it's embarrassing how bad my first drafts are, you know? But you have to.
Right.
You have to.
My comment is just to everybody else. In my series, the first book, the beginning of it was heavily based on things that I had done in Alaska, so I'm able to paint a really good picture on that. It's also heavily fictionalized, and it was funny when my friends read it, and they would come back and they go, "Oh God, I remember when you did that, when that happened." No, it never happened. I never did any jail time. Never got arrested. There's a lot of things, but it's just funny to hear your people who know you who are going to remember things that never happened.
Yeah. But because you lived there, and you lived there, you know the people, the culture, the weather, the clouds,
That's right.
the flowers, the idiosyncrasies of the society. You can write about it in a way I can't,
That's right.
right? It's not to say that I can't research Alaska. right? I could research Alaska, I could read all about it, read about the culture, look at pictures, and I could go, like if someone said, you have to write a story about Alaska, I could do it, right? I will never be able to do it the way you can do it, because you were there, right? So that's the beauty of autofiction. You're drawing from things you know about. So hey, share it with us, you know? Write about it. You can bring me to Alaska in a way I can. Tony writes about San Francisco in a way like people who have never been there, after reading Tony, you're like, you've been to San Francisco. You know, it's in his blood, in his bones, many generations, you know. So we have a gift of where we came from and what we experienced, and like, you know, share it with everybody. I have my own experiences. I've gone to the Philippines twice in my life. I'm born and raised here. I'm American. I've gone to the Philippines twice in my life, and when I started writing stories set in the Philippines, I was like, you know, I have no right. I am not a Filipino from the Philippines. I did not grow up there. Who am I to set a story in the Philippines and act like I'm some kind of authority on the culture and everything? And you know what? I was like, oh well, I'm gonna try, I'm gonna do it. 4 of the stories in my book are set in the Philippines. I've been there twice in my life. But you know what? I grew up in a Filipino immigrant household. My parents were born and raised in the Philippines. My grandparents were in the house. Multiple languages being spoken. I'm eating the food. I'm being judged by the, you know, the things that you judge people by in Filipino culture. Like, I'm not physically from the Philippines, but I grew up very Filipino. And I was like, hey, that's license enough. You know, and I have relatives and friends from the Philippines who read the stories set in the Philippines, and they were like totally legit. Like, I believe 100% of it, you got it, right? And one of the ways you can get over it, Balikbayan, which is the last story in the book, it's a Filipino-American traveling to the Philippines. So I don't have to be an expert, because that character's like, wow, look at that, look at this, right?
I wanted to just mention, you had mentioned the Pantser. It just brought me back to what one of the advisors at Vermont College, in one of his lectures, his name is Clint McCown. He's a writer from Tennessee, and it was a juxtaposition on the 2 different approaches. He says that you can either be a gusher or a chipper. So the gusher is like, you let it all out, and then like Beverly was saying, and revise, you go back and you sculpt it and you shape it. Or, you know, you're more of a chipper, you know, you have the different approaches. So when you brought the Pantser up, I was thinking about the gusher, you know, like the gusher.
So let's see, it's 11 o'clock. I have a writing prompt for you guys, and I want to make sure we have time to share, because I'm dying to hear from you. But what I wanted to do before I launch into how do you write it, how do you get started, I know a lot of you are already writing it, but I just wanted to read from Savior. And here is the young girl living in the abusive household. Here is a scene that never happened, okay? Never happened, but let me just get there. Okay. Okay, so her name is Lourdes. Her friend, who she knows from school, her friend's not very popular, and so she doesn't really hang out with her friend Amelia at school, because I think Amelia had lice, and people don't like Amelia, and you know, but they live on the same block, so she'll play with Amelia at home, but she pretends she doesn't know her at school, okay? So this scene comes right after Lourdes, the young protagonist, got like a physical beating, you know, from her dad. And this scene comes a few days later. Amelia came over after school to check on me and deliver my homework packet. She didn't go to school because she'd gotten beaten and her mom called in sick for her. She said, "You don't look sick." We locked ourselves in the bathroom, a mixture of steam and vinegar left behind from Grandma's bath, and ripped the clothes off 3 Barbies and a Ken doll. We filled the sink with bubbles and had them dive off the rim, splashing around, talking about suntans and surfboards. It wasn't long before Amelia and I took our clothes off too. Grandma banged on the bathroom door, so we jumped back into our clothes. "Lala," she called out, using a nickname she'd given me. "Do you want some snacks?" "Don't you dare tell anyone what we did today, Amelia," I whispered, wagging my finger in her face. "I promise," she said, crossing her fingers before running out of the bathroom and through the front door without looking back. Okay, so you've got this boiling point in this house. There's this abuse going on, and Lourdes, as a protagonist, is of coming of age, right? And I thought, when I was writing this, I thought, Lourdes is getting controlled and overpowered by her violent father. And she's also of the age where she's learning about sex education and sex, right? And I thought, how could Lourdes control someone, right? How can she overpower someone? So I created this sexual scene where she is clearly in charge and telling Amelia what to do, right? So, and then there's repercussions of this scene later. That's autofiction, because the emotional truth is feeling overpowered and having no control, and how would that manifest in a child, right? And then having this certain age, I thought of, okay, sexual power. So it didn't happen, but there's an emotional truth, and I needed that scene. So that's an example of how I used autofiction in the first story called Savior. But I wanted to move on and talk about how do you write it. Author Adele Anesi, who I talked about earlier, she says, go to your writing space, give yourself time to remember. It doesn't have to be chronological, right? And a writing teacher once said, if you're not sure what you want to write about, take a searchlight. You know how lighthouses, like it's dark, there's a dark ocean, and the lighthouse has a searchlight. Take a searchlight to your life and stop on those events, those times, those feelings that bring up some kind of emotion for you, whether you know why or not. Whether you know why or not. You know, let's say you do a searchlight on your life, and senior prom, you get this feeling, senior prom, and you don't know why. There might be something there. There might be something there. Or you hit the searchlight and there's, you know, someone you broke up with and it was more painful than any other breakup you've had. What's there, right? So it's almost like as writers, we have to use our senses, our feelings, our cells, our blood, our brain, to figure out what it is that really stuck with us, that hurt us, or gave us joy. It's in our body. Our body's holding the information. And as we scan this ocean of our lives, and we're like, aha, that's how you can start writing autofiction. That's how you can start writing anything. That's how you can start writing a poem, an essay, memoir, fiction, right? But in autofiction, that's a way. So list them out. List them out. Because they're there. Those moments are there. Start from your earliest memory and go to the present day, right? Sometimes just for fun, I'll be like, okay, 0 to 10, 11 to 20, 21 to 30. And I'm like, what happened in these decades of my life that I want to write about? So that's the first step, is give yourself time to really think about your life, which I know all of you are already thinking about because you're writers. Okay. And then start thinking about the events. So there are events, this happened, this thing happened. And then there are turning points. Again, a turning point, something happened and it changed the trajectory of your life, right? What led up to these occurrences? You know, what's the situation? What is the situation? In Savior that I just read to you, the situation is a young girl navigating an immigrant household with violence, right? That's the situation. A violent father figure. List what you learned or discovered. Figure out what the situation is. What's the context? What's the circumstance? Right? Again, Savior, 10-year-old girl, right? San Jose, California. President Carter is the president at the time, so that's in the 70s, right? That's the circumstance. That's a situation. One-story house in San Jose, religious Catholic family, grandparents in the house. That's the situation, right? Racism is there. Financial insecurity is there. And then what's the story? That's the emotional experience that we as writers are holding within ourselves, that we're all trying to express, examine, interrogate, right? So there's the situation of the story, and then there's the emotional experience as a person who has something to say about that. And in my story, Savior, I keep going back to Savior because it's a good example. This never happened in real life, but someone called the cops in Savior because of the noise and the crying and the screaming. So this big giant cop comes into the house and, you know, puts the dad in his place, right? And now the dad's like, oh shit, someone could call the cops, you know? And the little girl, the story ends with the little girl saying, I don't know if my dad's going to stop, but I know if I keep my bedroom window open, someone's listening, right? So that's the emotional truth. I didn't have, in my real life situation, I didn't have a cop come into the house. I never had help. I never had, you know, it was a secret thing that happened in the house. But in my story, I was able to bring a cop in, right? It was my own redeeming of what happened. And that cop, you know, and the father figure had to be vulnerable, because in the story, he's basically a tyrant. But when the cop comes in, yes sir, I'm sorry, right? The father has to be vulnerable. This is a public figure, you know, coming into your home. So you know, that story enabled me to give something to the girl that I didn't get, right? Okay, next. So once you have your list and you know what you want to write about, then you start reflecting on how you're going to arrange things, how accurately you want to tell it, you know, how much you're going to reveal of your own life. That's up to you, right? Autofiction is, you are in control. If you want it to be very heavily based on your life and you want to share very intimate details, you can do that. If you're not comfortable with that, you decide. You decide how much you want to share, right? It's still autofiction, but you're in control and you get to decide what you reveal and what you don't. Okay. And next. Okay, do you guys want to do a little exercise?
Sure.
Okay. So it would be way too much to say, okay, everyone write an autofiction piece right now. But if you're ready and you want to, please do. But if you're not, I would just invite you to spend some time and create a list of things that you might write about. Like be that searchlight. Start from birth to present day and write a list. It could be a short list, it could be a long list of anything that you feel has that kind of emotional resonance within you. Whether it's joy or pain or trauma or loss, anything that you feel energy around, right? Because the more energy we feel as a writer, we're going to put that on the page, and that energy is going to be picked up by the reader. The reader is going to, through osmosis, take in that energy because you, the author, have it as you're producing the piece. And then, it doesn't have to be now, but select one event to write about. Figure out your situation. Right here I talk about wildflowers, which is in the book, where a lonely woman visits an elderly woman to deliver a holiday meal. That's a situation. And then what's the story? The emotional experience for me in that story was self-love. Because I did go volunteer I volunteered a lot in San Francisco, but there was one time I volunteered, and it was on Christmas Day. My family was celebrating Christmas the next day because my sister was a nurse and she had to work on Christmas. So I volunteered to deliver this meal, and I picked up the meal, drove through San Francisco, parked in Chinatown, and delivered this meal to this elderly woman. She was an elderly white woman, and she had been an artist. So here I thought I was going, I'm the hero, I'm going to get the meal, and I'm going to go deliver this poor, old, lonely soul this holiday meal. Aren't I wonderful? Aren't I great? Well, you know what happened? I walked in, she was bedridden, probably in mid-80s. She had been an artist. She had art everywhere. She had art supplies on the table. You know, we didn't talk very much. There was not a lot of words exchanged. She asked me to open the mini champagne bottle that came with the meal, so she drank that. I knew nothing about her. She knew nothing about me. The visit was very brief, and on the way out, she handed me a little kind of like a card, almost like a print of something she had created. And it was a picture of a woman that said peace. I walked back to my car and I said, she didn't need me at all. That woman lived her life exactly how she wanted to live it. She was an artist, you know, she didn't appear lonely. She was happy to see me, but you know, in training they said, don't promise you're gonna come back. That causes problems, because then the old people want you to come back and you don't want to go, you know, you don't have time and you promised. She never even asked me to come back, you know? She didn't need it. She was a content, peaceful woman who lived a beautiful life. I was blown away. And then I wrote Wildflowers, because I was like, at that point in my life, and I still struggle with it, you know, I didn't have self-love. I didn't see the beauty in myself. I saw the beauty in other people, but not really in myself. So what I did was, in the story, this didn't happen, but I had the old woman ask the protagonist, can I draw you? So she draws her. And the ending is a big surprise that I won't share. But that story, none of that dialogue happened. None of that happened. But I really did go see the old woman, right? But the emotional truth for me was that she taught me more about myself. She gave me more. I'm the one who was supposed to be delivering a gift. She gave me a gift. She gave me a gift because she showed me how she lived her life in this beautiful way around art. And it was a time where I wanted to be a writer but didn't know how to start. And there's a scene where the protagonist This is where I imbued my own emotions into that protagonist. There's a scene where she says, I want to be an artist too, but I don't know how. I've studied it in school. I interview artists. I went to Florence and went to see the Botticelli paintings, but I do everything around art except putting a brush to canvas. You know what? That is me, because I wanted to be a writer. I interviewed writers. I studied English literature. I went to readings. I did everything around writing. I was orbiting. And then one day, I took the plunge. It was 2005, and I wrote out a contract, printed it, signed it, contract to myself, that I was going to try to be a writer no matter what. If I failed, at least I can say I tried my very hardest. But I was able to create that scene in the story Wildflowers about the desire to be an artist because I felt it. So I gave it to the character. But she wanted to be a painter. But the feeling's the same. It's a desire to be creative, right? So that's another example how you imbue your own thoughts and feelings into the character. That's autofiction, right? So, okay. So, do you guys want, you can just make your list. And you just do whatever's comfortable for you. If you just want to make a list of things, you can share your list and tell us like why these things came up for you. Or if you want to make your list and select one event and tell us why that one event is really pushing you to write, to be written. That's what we can do. It's kind of a writing prompt, but it's more of a like getting started prompt. Does anyone have questions?
How about just a profound thought?
Profound thoughts are always welcome.
Well, I'm sitting here listening to something I'm learning about now, autofiction. About 5 or 6 years ago, I attended the most delightful, wonderful, exciting memoir group. And all of us, 5 or 6 of us would cheer, 5 or 6. And it was so exciting because everybody had this fantastic life. We couldn't wait till the next week to see what happened.
Yes, yes.
And so I would get people saying, that's not true. That couldn't have happened. I said, it's real. It really happened. Everything I wrote is true. Now, with the new intelligence power and autofiction, no one's going to believe my memoir. That's my profound thought. Now they really will not believe it because so much autofiction is out.
That's funny. But it's not that they're not the same though. They're not the same.
Just had the Sierra Poetry Festival last Saturday, and we were blessed to have Jane Hirschfeld and Ross Gay there. Totally amazing. My God. And they both read and spoke, and then we did a workshop stuff with them. And a question that was asked to both of them that I found fascinating that we can all relate to, anybody that's picked up a piece of pen to put it to paper, a pencil, is how do you write? And I mean that like physically, not how you prepare yourself, not how you line your stuff. Are you one of those people that scribbles on little pieces of paper that accumulate, that gets in piles where you're going to go ahead and protect your memory, because the best memory is a pen and paper.
Yeah.
And then do you physically write on paper, then you go ahead and like do your dump, and then go ahead and put it into the computer, then go ahead and start working it that way.
Yeah,
you
the
know,
process.
or are you outlining on paper,
Yeah,
and then are
yeah.
you trying to backfill your own outline?
So that's a great process question. I think the most important, the most important response to any process question is whatever you're doing is right. Because my process is different from his process, is different from your process, You know what works for you. So if a famous writer gets up at 6 a.m. and lights a candle and spins 3 times, you don't have to do that. That's what they do, okay? Your process is your process. My personal process, I don't outline. I'm very driven by feelings and intuition, and I just launch in I just dive into that thing, that feeling that's driving me. A lot of pieces ask to be written. Like, I have pieces knocking on my door in my head saying, hey, when are you gonna write me? And I'm like, I know, I'm busy, I know, for years. I have a piece about my mom that I have not written for 6 years. It's been knocking, I'm like, I know. I do have a big artist sketchbook, and I do have like the character, and I'll just like have like notes coming out like a sun, describing like events or turning points, kind of like a riffing off things, but I don't follow any kind of outline. But some people do, and that's great because it works for them. Tony does everything on paper.
And that's what Ross was talking about. Ross was going, well, he thought that was kind of an interesting question. And he says, well, I write everywhere, but he says, piece of paper and pencil, that's literally what he was saying. It's that simple.
Yeah.
It's a piece of paper and pencil, and that's how he does it.
What you said was interesting. I think you said the best memory is a pen and paper. A fellow that I worked with in North Carolina, he played football for a long time, and he shared with us what his coach told him. He said, the coach said, a short pencil is better than a long memory.
Yeah. So let's, when should we give people like 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Sure. 10 minutes, and would love to hear what's on your list. And why? What's on your list and why it's on your list?
Very happy.
How'd you do? So we're going to share for about 10 or 15 minutes. If you want to share from your list, share whatever you want. You can share if you had trouble creating a list, or if you were able to create a list, or if you picked something from the list that you think you would like to create a story around. I'd love to hear from anyone who wants to share.
Okay. I went to a Mary Kay party once. Everyone was in a similar situation. No family around, no friends or husbands. Our husband's about to go to Iraq. Ashley, the host, taught me how to moisturize my hands, a process that took 3 different products and about 10 paper towels. See, this is what I want, Ashley said, just to do something like this at home and then raise my kids. Me or one of the other wives murmured something encouraging and bright. I'm trying to get pregnant, Ashley said, but I think I'm getting my period. We all murmured something sympathetic. The husband came in. He didn't say hi to any of us, but he seemed tired. It was okay. He took a white cockatiel from its cage and said, "What's up, Henry?" and let the bird sit on his shoulder while he grabbed orange juice from the fridge.
Wow! Oh my God! That is amazing. You just wrote that right now.
Yeah.
Okay, what's her circumstance? What's the situation of the story? The situation, as I gather it, there's a party.
Yeah.
And it's a Mary Kay party. They're women, they're wives, and one is trying to get pregnant. They're talking about what women talk about around pregnancy and their marriages. That right there is so ripe for a story, right? You've got different women who have different relationships. Some might have a good marriage, some might not have a good marriage, right? The protagonist, what does she want? Is she happy? This is like, there's a term for this, and it's called domestic fiction. I write it too. Domestic fiction. It's like fiction in the domestic house. And then you've got this husband, he's not so friendly, right? So you've got some dynamic going on here. They're in his home, but he's not friendly. He's not like welcoming everybody. And then this bird, you know? There's something about that bird. He's going to the bird. I mean, just the piece you read, that, you know, you can build that up. What happened before? What happens at the party? What happens after the party? You know, what is the emotional truth? Why are you remembering that? You know, what was the emotional truth for you as the author behind that? You might know or you might not know, but that's kind of, that will help guide you as to why that memory came up. Did you think about the emotional truth of that experience in your life?
Yeah, I was trying to figure that out, because I was like, man, it was just, we were so young back then, because I was 20, and we have no education, no family to help with babies, and then we had this image of, oh, our husbands are going to war, and it's like you're transported in the 1950s, like we're trying to relive that fantasy and perpetuate it, even though it's really hard, and then later I remember just having like, helping people move out, their husbands came back from Iraq, like, angry and terrible, and they don't have support. And they would just have these boxes with their Mary Kay in their storage.
Wow.
You know? And like,
wow.
Different, yeah, I was just remembering that with Mary Kay over and over again. I was just like, there was so much hope into this, into this thing, right?
There's I don't know the author's name, but there's an author who wrote a short story collection. The title is something like What They Left Behind. I'm not getting it right. It's something like that. But I think she went to Vermont College, the author. So she was married to someone in the service, and it was her collection of stories is all about what happens after all the men go off to war and what happens with the women. So I hope if I could find it, I'll send it to Margie. But that might be interesting for you. But I mean, you're saying that the men in your piece are going off to war?
Yeah, and then I remember, later on, like when this couple divorced, and I was just like, what happened to the bird? It was like they're like, oh, they're giving the bird away. Like it stuck to me like later on.
Yeah, no, the minute that bird came up, I was like, there's something with the bird. You have something. You have whatever you want it to be. You have a short story collection. You have a novel. You have a memoir. I mean, there's so much conflict. There's war, and then there's the wives, right? Whatever. I hope you keep writing it out. Just even if you can't define what it is right now. Just write it all out. Even if you don't know if it's a novel or a short story, you can figure that out later, you know? Just write out all those memories. That is so rich. That's really rich.
Can I just ask you a quick question? So you asked her about the emotion, and this is something, like, I've spent years trying to stop the emotions from her things. What's your process to allow that to come out and then communicate? How do we tackle that?
You know, that is such a great question. So a friend once said to me, you know, he was kind of half joking, but he was like, oh, all writers are crazy. You guys are just almost like pouring your heart out, whatever, right? The difference between what we're doing as writers and someone just sitting down and ranting on a piece of paper is we're trying to shape it.
Yeah.
We're creating scene, dialogue, tension, image,
Movement,
metaphor. We're shaping it, right? And so in order to do that with a piece of art around something that was painful, I think there's a few things. You could look at your life a little separately, like, can I go to counseling? Can I read books? Can I help heal myself around this thing? Or will writing this and treating it in fiction help me toward healing? Will this be a vehicle toward healing, right? And only you know when you're ready to write something painful. If something's too painful, it might not be time to write it. Maybe it's time to address it in another way in your life, like through therapy, right? Because that stuff is really rich to write about, but none of it's going to, none of it's going to hurt you as a person to do it. So it might not be the time. So like, how I said, like Savior, the child abusing, I didn't cry through any of it. Because it's like, I was in a place where I was ready to treat it as fiction, right? And there are scenes where the girl is getting hit, and if you read it, they're very flat scenes. They are not like, and he, it's very like, he raised his fist, he hit her in the spine. It's very matter of fact, actually. Because I was in a place where I could just get distance and write it as a writer. Because I had done a lot of work with therapy and Reiki masters and meditation and healing and acupuncture. I mean, you name it. I've done everything. Psychics. I do animal communication, which is a form of telepathic communication with animals. So that taught me to connect with the universe. So, you know what I mean? Like it's a personal journey for when you're ready. No one can tell you, oh, it's time to write it, right?
Yes.
It's when you're ready. If you are become ready,
If I could just add something to that. What I've learned, when you're writing about those traumatic things, such as violence, right, like Beverly has, what I've learned is that it's always kind of best to do that with a light touch.
Yeah.
Because you have, it really kind of brings it out more. I think one of the examples that we had when I was in school was a story that Chekhov had written about a man being attacked by a shark. And very matter of fact, it really brought out the brutality without really kind of hammering the table. And he wrote it from the point of view of, I think, of the shark. He wrote it from the shark's point of view and the point of view of the surrounding fish, which made it that much more powerful.
Yeah. Jhumpa Lahiri, the famous writer Jhumpa Lahiri, she won a Pulitzer for her short story collection in, I think, 2000 called Interpreter of Maladies. She has a novel that opens, I forget the name, I think it's, I can't remember the name of the novel right now, but she has a novel that opens with a horrific train wreck. I mean, horrific. And it goes on for pages and pages. After I read that, I had to put the book down because she did it in the most understated way. It was like the steel crushing and then people screaming and the sound and the smell of the burning, but it was so understated that the impact was tenfold. Now, if she would have been like, the train smashed into, and it was over the top language, it would have taken away from the impact of what was happening. So that was like masterful what she did.
You asked us to write about something, and I wrote about something, and I put a different spin on the ending.
Yeah.
I wish I would have thought of it many years ago. It was just a usual day like any other. I was about 6 years old and the younger side of 6. I was in the garage basement when I heard some racket. My stepdad was picking up toys from under the staircase and throwing them in an old toy box rapidly, as I could tell he was angry. In my child's voice, I said, "What are you going to do with our toys?" I'm throwing them away, and as the blue Rambler car's trunk was wide open, like a hungry tiger getting ready to eat all my toys and the toy box too.
Wow.
I cried and yelled and begged. As he drove away, lickety-split, until I heard a crash. And at the intersection, it was another car that hit our blue Rambler trunk door, which opened widely, and all my toys started to fly out and onto the street.
Oh my God.
I ran and picked up some of my favorite toys and ran home with my toys safely in my arms. That's the fiction.
amazing.
That's
Yes!
the fiction.
Yes! You saved your toys!
The SOB kept driving.
Yes, I love it. So saving the toys is where the fiction came in.
Yeah, that broke my heart.
Right?
That
Yeah,
broke my
that's
heart.
my cop coming into the house, and you got your toys back.
I got my toys back in my
Yes,
head.
exactly. But God, what a situation you have. That is a powerful,
That was powerful.
powerful situation.
You know what I like about it, though, is that you have the situation, which is really compelling and drawing us in, but you have memory meeting child's voice.
Yeah.
So you have these two different points of view. You have the child's voice, which is this other thing.
Yeah.
That's cool the way that, yeah, that's cool.
I wish you would have gotten an accident.
Well, it is auto fiction. He could get severely injured.
So that's what's nice about fiction. You can put your own spin on it.
Yes. But you know what? You imbued the emotion of watching your toys get loaded onto a truck and driving away. You have that feeling and you put it into that piece. And we felt it. I felt it.
I still have it.
Yeah.
You said you put your own spin on it. Oh, did that car ever spin? Did it ever, right?
Okay, 5 more minutes. I sorry, can I go here? I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I grew up in state prisons all over the state of California. My father was a prison guard. And the last place we lived was San Quentin Prison. And I went to work at San Quentin Prison when I was 21 years old. And I hated it with all my heart and soul. I lasted a year, and I walked off the job without saying goodbye and started hitchhiking. I didn't stop hitchhiking until I got to Argentina. And so I thought of a novel just now, and it's a young man, innocent of any crime, escapes from San Quentin, where he has been unjustly incarcerated. And he is hunted down by the police.
Yes!
During which, unfortunately, he commits all the crimes that he never would have done.
I want to read that book. And you know what? You can write about San Quentin like none of us probably can.
Well, my first novel was written.
Oh, okay. Yes, right? Because you know it, you've lived it. That is so exhilarating to put your own life into fiction, because the level of confidence in writing about something that you know, it's just, yeah, it's amazing. Okay, did you want to share?
You made me think of going back and writing. I like to write short stories.
Yeah.
And I've got a lot I could write about, and I've never really thought about it. This is just a little seed. I'm the youngest in my family. Well, not counting Michael, he's my nephew, 2 years younger than me. My sister had sex with a guy, and Michael was born. So he's an illegitimate bastard. No disrespect, Michael. Michael lived with us on and off for most of my life, so he's more like my brother, but if I say that, then I can't say that I'm the youngest anymore. So we fought a lot, and we both understood what it was to be afraid of my father. Slipping comic books down our pants to protect our legs from the belt was his idea. I guess we were brothers.
Wow.
Just some thoughts, but I can springboard from this.
Yeah. That is amazing. I mean, even just the situation of being cousins / brothers, and then you also have a common enemy, right? Which is your father. I mean, this is ripe for a story, and especially like a coming of age story, young boys, and then you guys fought a lot, right? So, yeah, this could be, yeah, this could be, I mean, build on that. There's definitely something there.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah, you guys are all bringing, you've all bringing up a situation, right? What's happening, and you all also imbued it with emotion, your personal emotion. So you're writing autofiction. That's autofiction, and you changed some. You're changing stuff, right? Changing stuff because you can in autofiction. In memoir, I mean, there's no memoir police, but in memoir, you're not supposed to, right? In memoir, you're not supposed to say you picked up toys, right?
Yeah.
Because that didn't happen.
Yeah.
But in autofiction, that's fine, right? Anyone else want to share? Maybe one more? No? Well, I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.